The 1980s were a wild and colorful time. That decade gave us so many memorable trends, gadgets, and pop culture moments. But as time passes, many of those iconic things have disappeared or changed beyond recognition. In this video, we'll take a fun trip down memory lane and revisit popular items from the 80s that have since faded away. As we look back, get ready to feel a wave of nostalgia and maybe even a chuckle or two at the styles and tech we once loved. Some of these 80s staples are still around in some form, but they've evolved considerably. Others have vanished completely, leaving only nostalgia in their wake. Check out the full details by visiting the link in the description. Number 1. VHS Tapes. The VHS tapes were the kings of home entertainment in the 80s. Everyone had a collection of their favorite movies and TV shows recorded on these tapes. Going to the video rental store on a Friday night was a weekly ritual for many families. Kids today might not believe it, but we had to rewind these tapes after watching them. The satisfying whir of a VHS tape rewinding is a sound that's etched in the memories of 80s kids everywhere. While VHS tapes gave way to DVDs and then streaming services, they'll always hold a special place in our hearts. Number 2. Boomboxes. In the 80s, if you wanted to bring the party with you, you needed a boombox. These massive portable stereos were a common sight on city streets and in parks. They were the ultimate symbol of cool, often featured in hip-hop and breakdancing scenes in movies. Boomboxes came in all sizes, but the biggest and loudest ones were the most coveted. People would spend hours making the perfect mixtape to play on their boomboxes. These days, we can carry thousands of songs in our pockets, but nothing quite matches the statement made by walking down the street with a massive boombox on your shoulder. Number 3. Atari video games. Before PlayStation and Xbox, there was Atari. This company pioneered home video gaming in the early 80s with consoles like the Atari 2600. The games might look simple now, with their blocky graphics and basic sound effects, but back then, they were mind-blowing. Kids and adults alike spent hours playing classics like Pong, Space Invaders, and Pac-Man. Atari games required imagination. Those few pixels on the screen could represent anything. While Atari eventually lost out to Nintendo and Sega, it paved the way for the video game industry we know today. Number 4 on our list of things from the 1980s you probably forgot about is rotary phones. In the 80s, most homes still had rotary phones. These sturdy devices required you to spin a dial for each number you wanted to call. It took some practice to dial quickly without messing up. If you made a mistake, you had to hang up and start all over again. The satisfying click, click, click as the dial spun back was a familiar sound in every home. Rotary phones also gave us the phrase, hang up, which we still use today, even though most phones don't have receivers to hang up anymore. While they've been replaced by more efficient touch tone and mobile phones, rotary phones remain a beloved symbol of a simpler time. Number 5. Cassette tapes. Before we had digital music, we had cassette tapes. These little plastic rectangles held our favorite albums and homemade mixes. Making a mixtape for a friend or crush was a true labor of love, requiring careful song selection and precise timing. We'd spend hours listening to the radio, fingers hovering over the record button to catch our favorite songs. Cassette tapes weren't perfect. They could get tangled or eaten by tape players, and the sound quality wasn't great. But they were portable and recordable, which made them revolutionary for their time. The joy of receiving a carefully crafted mixtape is something that digital playlists just can't replicate. Number 6. Walkman. Sony's Walkman changed the way we listened to music in the 80s. Suddenly, we could take our tunes anywhere. These portable cassette players let us create our own personal soundtrack as we went about our day. The Walkman was sleek, for its time, and came with a pair of foam-covered headphones that became instantly recognizable. People would save up for months to buy one. It wasn't unusual to see joggers, commuters, and teenagers all bopping along to their private concerts. The Walkman was so popular that Walkman became a generic term for any portable music player. It set the stage for the iPods and smartphones that would follow decades later. Number 7. Film cameras. In the 80s, taking photos meant using a film camera. These cameras required you to load a roll of film, carefully compose your shot, and then wait days or even weeks to see how your pictures turned out. We didn't have the luxury of instantly deleting bad photos or taking 100 selfies to get the perfect one. Every shot counted because film and developing were expensive. Disposable cameras became popular for special events, and everyone knew the excitement of picking up a freshly developed roll of photos from the store. While digital cameras have made photography more accessible, many people still appreciate the thoughtfulness and anticipation that came with film photography. Number 8 on our list of things from the 1980s you probably forgot about is Saturday morning cartoons. Saturday mornings in the 80s meant one thing for kids: cartoons. We'd wake up early, grab a bowl of sugary cereal, and park ourselves in front of the TV for hours of animated entertainment. Networks dedicated entire blocks of programming to cartoons, featuring shows like The Smurfs, Thundercats, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was a weekly ritual that brought families together and gave kids something to look forward to all week. The anticipation of new episodes and the thrill of catching our favorite characters in action made Saturday mornings magical. This tradition faded as cable channels started offering cartoons 24/7. But for 80s kids, Saturday mornings will always hold a special place in our hearts. Number 9. Phone books. Before we could Google everything, we had phone books. These hefty times were delivered to every home and business, containing listings for everyone in the area. The white pages listed residential numbers, while the yellow pages were for businesses. Finding a number meant flipping through pages of tiny print, running your finger down columns of names. Phone books were also handy for other purposes. Kids used them as booster seats, and they made great doorstops. Some people even practiced ripping them in half as a show of strength. As digital directories became common, phone books started to disappear. Today, they're rarely seen, but for a long time, they were an essential part of every household. Number 10. Arcade machines. In the 80s, arcades were the place to be for kids and teenagers. These dimly lit rooms filled with flashing lights and electronic beeps were magical. Popular games like Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and Space Invaders drew crowds of players eager to test their skills. We'd save up our quarters all week for a chance to play. The thrill of seeing your initials on the high score list was unbeatable. Arcades were also social hubs where friendships were formed and rivalries were born. As home gaming systems became more advanced, arcades began to disappear. While some still exist today, they can't quite capture the excitement and atmosphere of 80s arcade culture. Number 11. New Coke. In 1985, Coca-Cola made a decision that would go down in marketing history. They changed their classic formula and introduced New Coke. The company thought people would love the sweeter taste, but they were wrong. Consumers were outraged, and a massive backlash followed. People hoarded cases of the original Coke and protested the new formula. After just 79 days, Coca-Cola brought back the original recipe, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic. The New Coke fiasco became a cautionary tale in the business world. It showed that even giant corporations could make big mistakes, and it demonstrated the power of consumer loyalty. Today, New Coke is remembered as one of the biggest marketing blunders of all time. Number 12 on our list of things from the 1980s you probably forgot about is mullets. The mullet hairstyle reached peak popularity in the 80s. This unique cut featured short hair on top and sides with long hair in the back, hence the phrase, business in the front, party in the back. Everyone from rock stars to regular folks sported mullets. It was seen as edgy and cool, a perfect blend of conservative and rebellious styles. People got creative with their mullets, adding volume on top or growing the back extra long. While the mullet is often mocked today, it was a genuine fashion statement in the 80s. The style has made occasional comebacks, but it remains strongly associated with 80s culture. Before we continue with the video, take a quick moment to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Plus, we've got some helpful resources in the description. Check them out and share your comments after you're done watching. Number 13. Rubiks Cube. The Rubiks Cube took the world by storm in the early 80s. This colorful puzzle challenged people to align all sides with matching colors. It seemed simple, but proved incredibly difficult for most. People spent hours twisting and turning, trying to solve the puzzle. Some got so frustrated they peeled off the stickers to solve it. The Rubiks Cube became a global phenomenon, spawning competitions and even a cartoon show. While it's still available today, it doesn't have the same cultural impact it did in the 80s. Back then, it wasn't unusual to see people fiddling with Rubiks Cubes on buses, in parks, or during their lunch breaks. Number 14. Hypercolor T-shirts. Hypercolor T-shirts were a wild fashion trend in the late 80s and early 90s. These shirts were made with special heat-sensitive dye that changes color when touched or exposed to heat. Kids loved pressing their hands against the shirts to leave colorful handprints. The shirts came in various color combinations and were a hot item in schools and malls. Unfortunately, the novelty wore off quickly, and the special dye often faded after a few washes. The shirts also had an unfortunate tendency to change color in embarrassing places due to body heat. While hypercolor shirts were a short-lived fad, they perfectly captured the bold, experimental fashion spirit of the 80s. Number 15. Roller rinks. Roller rinks were the coolest hangout spots for teens in the 80s. Every weekend, kids would lace up their skates and hit the rink. The disco lights, the top 40 hits blasting through the speakers, and the thrill of gliding around the smooth floor created an electric atmosphere. Couple skates were a big deal, giving shy teens a chance to hold hands with their crushes. Skate parties were popular for birthdays and other celebrations. Even adults got in on the fun with roller disco nights. While some rinks still exist today, they're not the social hubs they once were. For many 80s kids, the roller rink was where they experienced their first taste of independence and social interaction. Number 16 on our list of things from the 1980s you probably forgot about is leg warmers. Leg warmers exploded in popularity thanks to movies like Flashdance and the aerobics craze of the 80s. These cozy tubes of fabric were worn over leggings, tights, or bare legs. They came in every color imaginable and were often paired with leotards or miniskirts. Despite their name, leg warmers were more about fashion than function. Everyone wore them, dancers, workout enthusiasts, and fashion-forward teens alike. They added a pop of color and a touch of 80s flair to any outfit. While leg warmers occasionally make comebacks in retro-inspired fashion, they remain firmly associated with 80s style in most people's minds. Number 17. Trapper keepers. Trapper keepers were the ultimate school accessory in the 80s. These large binders featured colorful designs, Velcro closures, and folders to keep papers organized. Kids loved the fun patterns and the satisfying rip of the Velcro. Trapper keepers came in countless designs, featuring everything from cute animals to space scenes. They were more than just school supplies. They were a way for kids to express their personalities. Students would often decorate their trapper keepers with stickers and doodles, while modern students might use tablets or laptops. 80s kids knew the satisfaction of a well-organized trapper keeper. Number 18. Jelly shoes. Jelly shoes were a footwear phenomenon in the 80s. These shoes were made entirely of soft plastic or rubber and came in a rainbow of colors, often with glitter mixed in. They were cheap, waterproof, and matched everything. Kids loved them for playing in sprinklers or at the beach. Adults wore fancier versions with heels for a fun, casual look. Jelly shoes had their downsides. They could be sweaty and uncomfortable, and they made a distinctive squeak when you walked. But in the 80s, fashion often trumped comfort, and jelly shoes were the epitome of cool. Today, they occasionally resurface as a nostalgic fashion trend. Number 19. Payphones. Before cell phones, payphones were our lifeline when we were away from home. You'd find them on street corners, in shopping malls, and at gas stations. Making a call meant having the right change ready and hoping the phone wasn't out of order. People memorized important phone numbers because there was no contact list to rely on. Payphones played a big role in pop culture too. Just think of Superman changing in phone booths. As mobile phones became more common, payphones started disappearing. Today, spotting a working payphone is a rare occurrence, but for many years, they were an essential part of daily life. Number 20 on our list of things from the 1980s you probably forgot about is Cabbage Patch Kids. Cabbage Patch Kids were more than just dolls. They were a cultural phenomenon. Each doll came with adoption papers and a unique name, making kids feel like they were really adopting a child. The dolls had soft, huggable bodies and plastic heads with yarn hair. In the early 80s, demand for these dolls was so high that it led to store riots and scalping. Parents would line up for hours hoping to snag one for their child. While Cabbage Patch Kids are still produced today, they don't have the same frenzied following they did in the 80s. For many people, these dolls represent the epitome of 80s toy crazes. Number 21. Shoulder pads. Shoulder pads were a defining feature of 80s fashion. They showed up in everything from business suits to casual wear, for both men and women. The idea was to create a strong, powerful silhouette. Some shoulder pads were sewn into garments, while others could be added or removed with Velcro. The bigger, the better was the motto. Some shoulder pads were so large, they made people look like football players. This trend was all about power dressing and making a statement. While shoulder pads have made minor comebacks, their extreme 80s form remains a distinctive marker of the decade's fashion. Number 22. Mall culture. In the 80s, the mall wasn't just a place to shop. It was the place to be. Teens would spend entire Saturdays at the mall, hanging out in food courts, browsing at stores, and trying to look cool. Malls were social hubs where you could catch up with friends, maybe run into your crush, and spend your allowance. Every mall had its essential stores: Orange Julius, Sam Goody, Spencer's Gifts. Malls were also a safe space for teens to exercise some independence. With the rise of online shopping, mall culture has declined, but for 80s teens, the mall was the center of their social universe. Number 23. Pagers or beepers. Before texting, we had pagers. These small devices would display phone numbers or simple numeric codes. Doctors and business people used them to stay in touch, but they also became popular with teens. Kids developed elaborate number codes to communicate. 143 means, "I love you," based on the number of letters in each word. Getting a page gave you a little thrill. Someone was thinking of you. Of course, you then had to find a phone to call them back. Pagers were an early step towards the always connected culture we have today. They seem clunky now, but in the 80s and early 90s, they were cutting-edge technology. The 24th on our list of things. From the 1980s, you probably forgot about is tape decks. No 80s car was complete without a tape deck. These were essential for any road trip, or even just cruising around town. We'd spend hours making the perfect mixtape for long drives. The click of pushing in a tape and the mechanical whir as it started playing are sounds that bring back memories for many. Tape decks had their quirks. Tapes could get stuck or eaten, and sometimes you had to use a pencil to wind them back up. Despite these issues, tape decks were a huge improvement over 8-tracks and paved the way for car CD players and eventually digital audio systems. For 80s kids, the car tape deck was an integral part of their musical journey. Our journey through these 80s favorites really shows how much things have changed. It's wild to think that many kids today might never experience the joy of finally solving a Rubiks Cube, or the anticipation of waiting for a roll of film to be developed. While technology has moved on and fashion has evolved, there's something special about these 80s trends and gadgets. They remind us of a time when social connections were more physical, when patience was a virtue, and when a little imagination could turn a few pixels into an epic space battle. Sure, we might not want to trade our smartphones for pagers or give up streaming for VHS tapes, but it's fun to remember these bits of 80s culture that shaped our world. They're more than just old stuff, they're pieces of our shared history. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Also, don't forget the link in the description.